Hey guys, welcome back to the Unqualified Filmbros podcast. Coming at you tonight to talk about Alex Garland's newest movie, Civil War. It is the movie that made him want to focus more on writing and less on directing, but we will get into that in a little bit. In the meantime, we're going to dive right in. Gentlemen, Civil War. What'd you think?
I thought it was a pretty well executed movie. I think it did a
Pun
lot of what it set
intended?
out to do. Huh?
Pun intended?
No, but okay. I guess there's executions. Um, anyway, we're um yeah, I thought the movie was pretty good. I don't really understand the people that said it wasn't political. Um, kind of war is always political. Um, but yeah, I feel like it did a great job of taking what you would see overseas and bringing it back home
Mhm.
to a more digestible format to people who are American. Um, but yeah, I mean it has some flaws, I think, but the overall like vision for it, and I feel like the world that he directed and made, it felt very visceral and felt very real. Remind me a lot of like I mean tons of apocalyptic stuff. Some like 28 Days Later, obviously, since Alex Garland wrote that. Um, and I think he does a great job with this sort of apocalypse setting. He's very cynical when it comes to human beings. It's where he fits best. Uh,
I don't
and
blame
so,
him.
yeah, I think it works great. My only gripe would probably just be the ending is a little less than climactic.
It's a little
Um,
abrupt, yeah.
Mainly just the death of Lee is you could kind of see it coming, but it's more she just pushes her out of the way. It just sort of stands there, it seems. Though that may just be because she's doing it from the perspective of the shot and slowing it down, because she's shooting it. Obviously, that would be slow, but yeah, there were just some things that felt a little off. But overall, I very much enjoyed it. I thought it was a good movie.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, Ben. I mean, I also just also want to draw attention to the actual photographs that were taken and sort of made part of the film.
Hmm.
Um, they were stunning. I mean, I'm thinking of the specifically of the first one that Jesse takes that they sort of talk about and discuss with together with Lee. And like, I'm just trying to think. I mean, that would be on the front page of, well, not the failing New York Times, I guess, which is what we get in Civil War. But
Specifically on like Nat Geo or something.
the photos that were featured were remarkable, and I think the way that they were integrated within the film was really well done, and I liked that aspect of the film too.
Yeah, just my opening thoughts. I'm not generally one for like dystopian apocalyptic movies. And this wasn't apocalyptic. I think Ben, that might be an exaggeration. Um,
Well,
certainly it's dismal and it's bleak and it's existential about humanity's ability to destroy itself. Um, Perhaps less so than Oppenheimer, but and still in a similar vein. But I really enjoyed it too. I think from a filmmaking perspective, I haven't said something like this since I think Top Gun Maverick, but it starts with the sound design, like the way that they used both deafening sound, and I wish I had seen this in IMAX in retrospect, but the way that they use sort of this deafening cacophony of chaos, but also perfect silence, and then just the snapshots with each camera, the uh, photography frames that are sort of interspersed throughout. And I love the edit of this film. Uh, I think the sound was really what blew me away. And I don't often notice that. Like I said, it's probably been since Maverick that I really picked up on that on a first viewing. maybe Killers of the Flower Moon, and Oppenheimer, from last year. But again, then just getting into the story element of it, pretty much what I expected based on the trailer. There wasn't anything truly surprising about the narrative.
Much more of an experiential thing. I mean,
Yeah,
much like 28 Days Later, it's about
Yeah.
humanity gripping with the circumstances rather than something drastically changing. Like, as they say, president dies and there will be another war between, the Western forces or whatever. Uh, it's just a continuation of violence. But I think, yeah, I mean, the sound design, I was going to say, it reminded me a bit of Dunkirk. I mean, it utilizes a lot of
yeah.
war film techniques, which obviously makes sense. But I thought it was very clever to do it with a journalistic perspective rather than, a soldier or something, taking pictures rather than shooting people. Um,
Yep.
and also ups the stakes, right? Like they can't really protect themselves. They're literally just out there shooting the whatever's happening. They have no guns, they can't fire back or whatever. So they're just relying on the people around them. But it makes you very vulnerable. And since they're our perspective, it's very unnerving. Um, I mean, certainly not as unnerving as like many war films, but still it gets the point across.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I know I appreciated was, George, you talked about the sound. You brought it up, and the sound of the gunfire. I think I saw an interview with Alex Garland of how they record, and it was basically just them recording the guns firing the blanks, and they tried to keep it as pure and raw as possible, so that, you know, the sound and also the experience wasn't sanitized. And that's, I think, another great decision too, because that shows exactly what war photographers are going through every single day. They don't get the sanitized version of that one perfect shot that they get, however horrific it might be. They have to watch everything. They're watching it like we did in the theater, and that's as close as probably any of us is going to get to, hopefully, wartime photography. I mean, that was part of the experience as well.
I think part of what made this movie work so well for me is the role played by war photographers and journalists in this film. Just seeing our core four here in Lee, Joel, Jesse, and Sammy, seeing one how the sort of career in journalism has impacted each of the four of them. Joel and Lee are very much sort of in sync, on the same page, same wavelength in their careers. Sammy's the veteran, Jesse's the newbie, and we sort of get different perspectives on what the field itself can look like to these individuals, at different stages in their career. But then we get it through the lens of a modern civil war, which is not something that any journalist in the United States has not lived through a domestic civil war ever, or not ever, but anyone who is any current journalist in the United States has not seen an American Civil War. Um, but just to use that lens to present what war photographers go through, Max, as you said, but then just the role of journalism in society. Like you see the way that they interact with the soldiers, sort of riding right behind them as they're moving in formation through different sequences and different positions. You see how they're trying to get the perfect shot. In some cases, safety be damned, but also, you know, you have to do the job. You have to present these current events to the people. Um, and I think this movie, and I was talking about this with some of my coworkers because I work with journalists. I am a journalist. Uh, is just knowing what journalism is capable of and knowing the importance of journalists in any situation, but especially in one like this. You know, this is what journalists can do.
You know, I really didn't think that anyone would get the message of the impact of journalism from this movie, considering
I mean,
they
it's not
like
Spotlight, Ben, but it's
no,
similar
but like
in its
I
presentation of
I would disagree, and that
journalistic
Alex Garland is
heroes.
pretty cynical about it. Like, as he even has that moment where she says, I went overseas, I reported on all of this stuff, I showed the horrific things. She even has that flashback of all the things that happened when she was, taking pictures in other wars, and then it still happened here. It was like, it was all for naught. Um, so it's like it's important, but I feel like he's very cynical. It seems like he doesn't think that humanity can
It's
change.
entirely cynical. I mean, you see that
Um,
mostly through Lee and Sammy, but by the end, Joel and Jesse are as bitter and jaded as they are.
yeah. So everyone's sort of, given up. It's just weird that
I feel like
that
it's more. I'd like to clear that up though. Sorry, Ben, but I think it's more of a brokenness than just jaded, right? I mean, I think it's
well,
complete. I think they're at least close to the breaking point, if not broken.
yeah. But that's what I mean. It's
Yeah.
just that I wouldn't have guessed that somebody would be like journalism is important after that. I feel like there's a lot of
That's,
movies with journalism.
to be fair, I did preview the opening of this movie in a news story last weekend or the weekend before, and that was in a soundbite from Alex Garland talking about the role of journalism and the importance of journalism and how he wanted to present that. So,
Well, I guess he's not as cynical as I thought.
well, in his presentation of the dire state of humanity, he is. You're right about that. Um,
It just seemed like obviously it's important to photograph these things, and obviously it's important to make people understand, and the role of the younger journalist that you would inspire some people to do the same. Um, but the overall human does not seem capable of not repeating this cycle. I guess is his idea.
that
And
makes sense.
also, photography, right? It's bystanders. They're not getting in there to save someone's life. They're not getting in there to stop a riot or an execution. They're voyeurs. And I think there are a lot of shots that were nicely placed and sometimes a little bit too on the nose, where it looked like, it was very voyeuristic, and it looked like people peeping through the trees, or you thought that, it might pan to somebody else because they're watching,
Most of the
it
stuff in the
always
White
had,
House was very voyeuristic at the end.
yeah, it was. But, I think that's where I get a little cynicism too, where it's like, they're documentarians, but they're also documenting what's happening in their own country too, right? They're not
Yeah.
going off to another country where there could be that distance and that lack of care. But they're in their own country, and Americans like to talk a lot about fighting for their country, but the photographers didn't do that. The photojournalists didn't do that. Some are even embedded in their own country. They're embedded in their own country. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
it's great. I mean, yeah.
So in this film, there's a brief mention by Joel in the first act, uh, as they're getting ready to depart for Washington or early on their journey from New York to DC, very circuitous around to Pittsburgh, West Virginia area, where Joel sort of offhandedly mentions that the president's in his third term. Um, and that sort of meant I realized at the end of the film, or much later than I probably should have, that sort of meant to give an indication that the American federal government has become this authoritarian, uh, dictatorial, sort of different than the democracy that we all know. Uh,
George, I need to back up there. That's when you realized, didn't they
yeah,
talk
Ben, I
about
was
like
late on it. I was late on it, and I am admitting
they
that.
said press were executed if you go to DC right before then? I think that's a bigger red flag than 3 terms.
Yeah, I missed a lot of that. I'm admitting
All
it.
right, fair
I'm
enough.
ashamed. I'm admitting it.
It's just
So I was late on a lot of that. But
It's okay.
I think what we get in a lot of this movie, we can talk about Jesse Plemons, we can talk about the role of some of the other journalism, like the other reporters and photographers out there that they come across. There's a lot of moral gray area in this movie. I want to talk about that with you guys.
Well, sure. I mean, the entire thing, and it's like it's just hard to grapple with his thoughts on journalism because he makes a point that they're just, like Max said, very voyeuristic. Like they don't help. There was I mean, the one that stuck with me is the guy like stuck in a tire or something and being lit on fire, just like snapping pictures. It's like it's a very interesting thing, and that is
Because
a
once
gray
you
area. It's
involve
like,
yourself, you're part of it. There's
yeah,
no going back.
do you involve yourself to try and make a difference, or do you just take a picture and hope that somebody else does?
The latter.
Uh,
And that sucks, but it's the latter every time.
yeah, I mean it's a tough thing. It's just it feels very cynical. I know that
Yeah.
he said that journalism is important, but he also, I don't know, he just hates humans, I feel
I mean,
like.
I think those two things can still be true, right? I
Yeah.
think he can believe both things because the fact of the matter is journalism is important. Having the media is important,
Yeah,
but
well,
there's all it's not he's not saying it's all rosy.
no,
And
I'm
that,
sure he enjoys his own career. Like he made a movie
yeah,
about this. So clearly he wants people to photograph the real thing.
yeah.
Um, I'm sure that's where he got a lot of his ideas from. Is some of these definitely take inspiration from real war photographs. Um, but yeah, I mean, like there's plenty, but like there's always a few. I think one of the famous ones is like an African child starving, and he's taking a picture of it. And it's like they're just starving. You're just taking a picture, not you're spreading the word, but it's a very cynical profession in a way. You have to be. You have to distance yourself emotionally, and you see that with Lee, and that she doesn't really want to attach herself, and she tries to give herself excuses like if they die, it's their own fault. But you see her really lose it when uh what's his name,
Sammy.
Sammy, um he dies, and I mean there's that scene where she's just sort of like wiping off his blood from the seat, just charging through, but she doesn't it really she's not the same after that moment.
No, and we sort of see in the raid on the White House how PTSD is kind of catching up with her.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, even, and I hate to make this about myself, but I'm going to. Even working in local news as I have for the last 4 years, like I'm so jaded, I guess is the best word, uh, to the point where, I can hear about someone getting shot. I can hear about someone getting in a car crash. I can hear about someone losing their home in a fire. And my first thought, not even my, yeah, my first thought is, all right, do I need to send a photographer to this? Do I need to get it in my show? What facts do I have? And it's not, the human element. It's not, oh my God, I feel so terrible for these people. Everyone involved, their lives are changed forever. It's just, oh, that's the next story.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we've all been desensitized to violence, especially Americans. And I think that was part of the thinking behind not mixing the gunshots in a studio, but just recording them and making people listen to what it sounds like, make them
I
listen
mean,
to the horror of it.
I
Yeah.
feel like a big thing with photography is it's sort of after the fact. I mean, you take it in the moment, but when people see it, they're divorced from reality. Like doing a movie such as this, where you actually experience it. It's not the aftermath. You actually understand what war is. I think he does a good job utilizing a lot of, like I said, war techniques. Certainly, the sound editing is great. Mixing things, making them be very realistic. But certainly, like the when the sound cuts out, the sort of personal sort of touches to the people that are getting hit by shell shock or whatever, it does feel like an experience. And it's not like there's some grand analogy here. It is very much like just the experience of living through war, or uh, photographing war, I guess. But I think it's very effective in that that's how it does it.
Yeah, and again, just like Max was talking about at the beginning of the episode, the way that the edit weaves in the still images is just
Mhm.
sublime. Because you're seeing them take these shots, and it could just be, Garland could have saved their still images for the credits and shown us them that way. He could have just ignored, or
Well,
not ignored, but he could have left out the still images, the frames, but choosing to intersperse them with the action as it's actually happening, 150% the right call.
he takes a lot of inspiration from my boy, the one and only Hitchcock.
All
You've
right,
seen
Ben,
Rear
you've got
Window?
about 1,000 my boys, so forgive me for not getting it exactly when you said it.
What do you mean? I've got like three, maybe two. Hitchcock and Jason Statham. Who else is there?
I
Rick
mean,
Deck.
and also replacing some of the gunshots with shutter clicks. I
Yeah.
think that was when they were at the building in the morning after the first morning, I think, and when they were shooting them from the truck. I believe that was one moment that they replaced the sound of gunfire with shutters of the camera.
Oh yeah.
If not
No, that
there, it happened at some point.
yeah. No, I definitely noticed that. As in, like, they're shooting, but just not the same thing.
Yeah,
It's a clever little thing.
yeah.
Um,
It's a different kind of shooting.
yeah. But yeah. Have you? I was going to ask. Have you seen Rear Window, George? I don't remember.
I've seen parts of it. I've never seen it all the way through, but I'm familiar with the story and I've just never seen it all the way through.
You should watch it. It's also about a journalist, a war photographer, in fact. No, there's
In a
very clear
wheelchair and his
inspiration.
neighbors, and I get it.
There's very clear inspiration from Civil War from that. Even the
Oh,
intercutting of
I brain fart. I thought you were saying that that was inspired by Civil War.
yes, yes, the Marvel Civil War though. Um, but yeah, I think it's a very clever, thing. It's like voyeuristic, and his whole dilemma is: do I do something or do I not? Um, and in that, it's like invading people's privacies. In this, it's like, do I involve myself? It's a lot more involved personally because they're actually actively in the scene rather than taken from afar. So it is voyeuristic, but they're in much greater danger.
And that sort of distinction of them being separate from the action versus in the action gets kind of blurred in the scene with Jesse Plemons, who absolutely steals the show,
Hmm.
as he is wont to do in several of his performances. And I think this is the third Jesse Plemons film that we've talked about. Certainly featured less in this one than in other films, but I love Jesse Plemons. I would love to work with him one day. I would love to see him in so many roles. Anyway, in this scene, the cameras are down, and it's really just about people and speaking to other people and reasoning with extremist soldiers, trying to find some common ground, negotiations. Um, and that's until the scene at the White House, that's probably the most involved that our main team sort of gets in the conflict. Um, really juxtaposed with that scene in the small town where they go into the used clothing store. Um, and sort of a difference in how close they are to this war. But I want to talk about the scene with Jesse Plemons because it's probably what I would consider the most intense sequence of the film.
Yeah.
Get your thoughts on it.
Well, you mentioned, I think it's really smart to have that little town that's divorced from the action technically. And then, just a few miles later, you're in Jesse Plemons territory, which is a real thing that happens in war all the time, where you have sections that are just completely war torn, and you enter a certain block, and all of a sudden it's just sort of dandy, and you have guards everywhere, but for the most part, people just try to act like everything's okay. Um, and then you juxtapose that with Jesse Plemons, who is psychotic. I don't even know. I mean, they do a good job of not explaining what in the world he does, whether he's part of like the White House or Western Front, or he's just plain crazy. And a good old American boy that kills people that aren't American. Um,
But he's also killing American civilians. Like that's the mass grave is American civilians.
maybe they weren't American enough for him.
Missouri,
Um,
Colorado, Hong Kong, right?
yeah, Hong Kong,
Florida.
Florida.
Florida, right?
He
Joel's
was
from
like,
Florida.
yeah, I mean, he may have killed them, but yeah, he definitely does not like Hong Kong. And
I
Donnie
was
was dead immediately.
I was actually wondering if he would kill Joel because he said he was from Florida
Yeah.
and wondering if Florida wasn't maybe
No,
he
I
didn't
mean
like
it's
Florida, the Florida
I had the same
forces,
thought.
whatever. Yeah.
excellent directing for thrill. He adjusts the rifle. He bides his time to say, "Oh, Florida, yeah, that's America, Central America." And there's lots of tension. They all say, "Oh, Colorado, Missouri," and then there's it was Donnie. That's his name.
I got it. Give me a second.
Thanks.
I
Thanks
think it was
so.
Donnie.
Tony.
Tony.
Yeah.
Okay, it was close. Um, so Tony freaks out and says he's from Hong Kong, and he gets immediately shot. But it's just great tension there. Like you don't know what he's going to do. It seems like everyone can die. And then Sammy comes, saves the day, but of course he bleeds out. It's um it's a scene with a lot of thrill and a lot of repercussion, which is something you don't actually see a lot in film these days.
Yeah.
People
It's
don't die a
either
lot.
everything is laid out for you, like we would have seen Sammy get shot and he would have died in Lee's arms or something, or it would have just been played for thrills with no consequences whatsoever. And I
Hmm.
think Ben, you're absolutely right. Garland really walks that line where he creates a mountain of tension unlike anywhere else in the entire film, which is already, first of all, at an hour 49, breakneck pace throughout, and yet it doesn't feel rushed.
Hmm.
And we've got all of the thrills here feeling like it's building to some kind of climactic moment. And then Sammy comes in, hits the two militiamen with the car, and then they pull Jesse out of the mass grave and they're moving on. And then you get the consequence of Sammy's bleeding out.
Yeah, I mean it's clever in that like he kills the two people that sort of just showed up. And you're like, oh my God, wow, that's sad. He lost his friend, but you think that they got away, and then he starts bleeding out. They casually wait a few seconds. He's like, I can't drive anymore, and then they show the blood. It's great. I mean, it's a very good scene from all perspectives, from the acting, the directing. That's how you do thrills. That's how you
And
build tension.
I don't know what truth there is to this. I think I read somewhere that they didn't have someone, or maybe they just had some other actor in.
Yeah, yeah. The actor
Right?
dropped out.
He
Jesse
dropped
Plemons.
out playing the Jesse Plemons role, so they asked Kirsten Dunst to get her husband, Jesse Plemons, come hang out on set for a day, and we'll do this shoot.
Kirsten Dunst offered her husband. She's like, my husband acts. You guys know Jesse.
Oh my God.
He could do this.
It
Let's
worked
talk.
out. I mean, he was excellent.
He's like the
Was.
highlight of the film, honestly.
I mean,
But
he's certainly the highlight of the trailer.
oh,
What kind of American has already become a meme?
I know.
Maybe for the wrong reasons, but still.
Um, the thing that I wanted to mention that I forgot with Sammy is that his death actually solidifies the people can and will die. Like you realize at the end that anybody could die. And Lee eventually does die, getting shot, but you feel like nobody is safe at that point. Um, it's a thing that's rare in film these days to have no protagonist that is safe. Um,
I was
everything
pretty
is
sure throughout the
laid
entire
out.
thing that Jesse was going to survive the whole thing.
Huh?
I was pretty confident throughout that Jesse was going to survive.
I thought so, but I also didn't know. I mean,
Like, um, yeah, in Saving Private Ryan, what's his name?
Private Ryan.
Ryben.
Private Ryben.
Yeah. Um, no, what's the actor's name? It's gonna kill me.
Um, it's been a long time. I don't know who any of
Do
those
they
actors.
Edward
live or do
Burns.
they?
Edward
Okay.
Burns.
Oh, Ed Burns. Yeah.
His character in Saving Private Ryan, he's an asshole for a lot of the movie, but he's one of, our core group. I was pretty sure the entire time I was watching it that he was going to survive. And that's how I felt about Jesse here. I remember thinking in the theater that similarity.
Well,
But anyway,
yeah.
I want to talk about Kirsten Dunst because we haven't talked about her enough tonight, and we haven't talked about her since The Power of the Dog. Um, I really enjoyed her performance here. I think she carried the weight of a bitter and jaded, but also still a little bit hopeful journalist in this world, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that. Don't all
She
jump
was
at
good.
once.
She was good, right? Like I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think you captured it nicely. She really did an exceptional job at being standoffish, but not being an unappealing and unattractive and uninteresting character. Like there was just a lot there, and especially that scene in the shop, where she tries on the dress, and you see her vulnerable for the first time. And I would argue the second time and the final time is when she gets shot, and it's in the stills. Um, but you don't really get a lot from her in terms of backstory, but you don't really need much.
You don't need it. You
You
just
don't need
need
it.
a
Oh,
relationship with the other three.
Yeah.
and in fact, backstory probably lessens it. Like
Yeah.
you give backstory, and all of a sudden they become a particular human. Whereas
Yeah.
Alex Garland is all about what a human would do in this scenario, not
Mhm.
what a particular human would do.
All you need is the Wikipedia page stuff.
Yeah.
It was kind of a cop-out line to get around providing any exposition.
I mean,
I don't disagree with it, but I just felt like it was a little bit of a cop-out.
I thought it was set up logically though, right? Like you're
Yeah,
I'm your hero. You should know what I'm about, like who I am. Tell me. Only hits the highlights. That's my Wikipedia. Like,
it worked.
yeah.
I just, I don't know.
seemed like somebody that is standoffish and doesn't really want to show an emotional side to her. I mean, she doesn't open up. Most of these people are very defensive in nature. But I guess some of them are kind of like Joel's pretty nice. He's pretty open to everybody.
I really
Uh,
liked June.
Mm-hmm.
and he is probably the most emotional. Like I think Kirsten does very good.
Yeah,
But
you
Joel
see,
definitely is
you see
crazy.
right after Sammy dies, he sort of goes through this almost emotional break where he just has to let out screams and crying and really just falling apart. And I don't they don't really get into the depth of his relationship with Sammy or any of the other characters besides Lee pretty much. And we still see just the toll of that sort of being the clinching moment for what causes him to finally let loose.
It was
And then it's
building. I
and then
mean,
it's right back to business.
yeah. And I
Even
mean, he jumps right back in. Yeah.
even at the end of the film, my favorite moment in the entire movie when he's with the Western forces in the Oval Office and he says, "Wait, before you execute the president, I need a quote." And they respect him, and he gets down right next to him and he says, "Do you have anything to say?" And uh, I forget the exact line that Nick Offerman's president says.
He
Don't let them
says,
kill
"Don't
me.
let them
Don't let
kill
them
me."
kill me. Don't let them kill me. I thought it was gonna be something like "spare me" or "show mercy."
Parlay.
"Don't let them kill me" is, and then just the fact that he says, "That'll do," or "That's perfect," and then he gets up and walks.
No, he says, and they never do, or something like that, because it was a callback to what
Oh
Sammy
yeah,
said about
yeah. I got you.
all the dictators. They're none of them are as they're
Mussolini and
weaker.
Gaddafi,
Yeah,
and
they're all weaker than you think they are, basically. Yeah,
I don't know if it was Mussolini, but I remember Gaddafi's name was said. I don't know. There have been a lot of dictators in history.
but
They
it was
right.
like it was like a don't meet your heroes moment. Um, but dark and twisted, and kind of the same
Super dark.
way
For
for
dictators.
and kind of the same for Jesse. Don't meet your heroes or you'll kill them. You'll get them killed. Like she made a bad decision in the White House and it got her hero killed.
Yeah, pretty bleak.
But
Yeah.
it kind of seems like she it is an interesting sort of mirror there. So like Lee is kind of disturbed after losing Sammy, and Jesse, after just going through a near death experience, has just become emboldened by it. Um,
But that's kind of what Lee was pushing her to become in the first half
yeah,
of the
so
movie.
she's essentially taken on the role of Lee, and Lee, who said that she would, take a picture of Jesse if she got shot, pushes her out of the way. She's sort of like
Mhm.
become emotional again. She can't distance herself because a
Yeah.
lot of these people are people that she knows now. And that it's that kind of like home soil thing. Everything is familiar.
And it's
Yeah.
a different sort of mentorship or uh, sort of parental role that Sammy played for Lee and Joel in the first half of the movie. What Lee becomes over the course of this film to Jesse is similar, but at the same time, it's not identical. And I think we get a really complicated relationship between the two characters, but it becomes a mutual respect. Obviously, there's a lot of respect going, almost superficial respect going one way from uh, Jesse to Lee at the beginning of the movie because she's sort of starstruck and this is her hero and blah blah blah. But then there's sort of a mutual understanding between the two characters by the time that Lee sacrifices herself for Jesse that shows a lot of depth and maturity and growth on the part of each character.
And you see it in subtle moments. I think especially after they've talked about that one photograph together in the bleachers, but you see moments where Kirsten Dunst will sort of lean down and be as close to Jesse's point of view as possible when they're in the Winter Wonderland, or she'll crouch behind her as she's taking a shot to see what she's seeing. So she's learning from Jesse all the same too. I mean, it's a mutual relationship in that way, sort of by the end of the film, I think.
Can we put Stephen McKinley Henderson in more movies? I think that would be fun.
Sure.
I
He's
wish he
Yeah.
hadn't been
he's on
cut
a
out of
roll right
Dune
now.
Part Two.
Where's the extended cut, Denny?
Ben will be there opening night for that. And
Yeah,
he's also going to be there opening night for Dune Messiah, which I can't wait for.
I will be.
Anything else on Civil War?
No, go see it.
Yeah, I think we can all toss a recommendation on this one.
For sure.
Uh,
You should also
please,
watch Rear Window though.
please double feature Rear Window and Civil War. They go
Do
really well,
That should
Civil
be
War.
I'm
You have to
told.
do Civil War first to see how it influences Rear Window.
yeah, that's
enjoy the movie. Go check it out. See it in IMAX. It's worth it. Um, we will be back next week talking about. Ben's excited for this one, I know. The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. We're back to Guy Ritchie for the first time in about a year.
Big guys doing big stuff.
Been described, at least as I've seen on social media, as a dude's rock kind of movie with Henry Cavill and Alan Richardson just kicking ass. And
Big guys.
I'm so ready for that.
Big guys.
They're big dudes.
Yeah.
Dudes rock.
Very big.
So we'll be seeing that movie in the next week. In the meantime, go see Civil War. Have a good night. See you next week.
Good night.